smart TV. Download the Millennium TV app from the App Store to stream our shows anywhere, anytime. Millennium TV.
Yes. Yes. Amun, are you there?
Yes.
All right. Listen, we are back. This is Millennium News 24 TV, and I'm coming to you, Bay, and I have a host coming back here again. His name is Amun Bay, and we're going to be talking about legal issues because a lot of people today, you know, not only just in the United States, but also in other countries, because they don't teach people laws in the school system. You would think that if to be a law-abiding citizen, that you would most likely turn your volume down. It's extremely loud. Getting feedback. Yeah, if you can turn it down as much as you can as possible. Yes, in the school systems today across the United States and probably most likely in other countries, they don't teach the people the laws. They want to keep the people disenfranchised about knowing the laws. All right, because how are you going to defend yourself if you don't know the laws? All right, so I deal with so many people and assisting them because I do paralegal work. All right, and I study law and I study finance. And most people don't even know about a Black's Law Dictionary. That's a dictionary that every household should have. You know, they have a academic dictionary like Noah's Webster's or whatever American Heritage Dictionary or whatever English dictionary they may have. But the most important dictionary that one should have in their household is a law dictionary. All right, because once you begin to study the legalese, right? The issue is that you will begin to recognize what the ADA is saying in court. You know what the judge is saying in court, you know, but because we don't know the language, because the language that the ordinary people speak today, they speak in academic language, but they're not speaking legalese. You know, is something wrong with your volume? Because it seems like it's enhancing, going up. Yeah, it's like you turn it down and it seems like it goes back up. Amun?
Yes.
Yes, your volume.
Too loud now?
Yeah, but it seems like it constantly keep going up.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, something's must be wrong with the mechanism. Why your volume keeps rising up high?
Yeah, my volume is on 6.
Yeah, but maybe bring it down to 3.
So if I put it on 4, is it too loud?
Well, it seemed like it keep going up, you know. But anyway, we're going to continue to go on with the show. So this is Amun Bey. He was here before. You know, he's a law student. All right. Give him some of your background, Brother Amun, so people can recognize what's going on.
Yeah. All right. So my name is Amun Bey. I'm a part of Phi Alpha Delta. It's a legal fraternity for law students. I started getting into, you know, this information, getting into trouble, and ended up happening a third time in the Dismal Crip. So I got familiar, you know, with the judicial process at an early age. 36. I was first incarcerated at the age of 19, and that opened up my eyes on how this judicial system worked. So my point, I think, you know, dealing with my recent experience is to help people, let people be aware of the fundamental process of the judicial system, and not just here, but, you know, all around, you know, the world, because every system is going to deal with some type of procedure or due process that one must follow. And I think it just be the basic stuff that we don't know be advanced, you know, because we missed a simple fundamental approach. The simple stuff is really the advanced things or advanced to certain people. But even with skilled attorneys missing little simple things, and if you have an attorney representing you, whether it's in a criminal case or a civil case, it could be an issue for you. So that's my goal, you know, in my demonstration, is to make everybody aware, people aware who is not aware. Mm-hmm.
Yes, it's interesting you saying that. In the United States, the citizens here, or the people here, we the people here, don't realize how they are fortunate that they can go to a law library, right, and study the laws for themselves. Because a lot of the people that I know, who comes to me and look for some an assistance, right? They don't know case law. They don't know procedure. They don't know the forms, right? They don't know the statutes, the regulations, and the rules of the court. They have an opportunity here in the United States to go to these places and look these things up. All right. And if you notice, hundreds of thousands of young men of our background,
President Joe Biden said,
is incarcerated. And the only time these young brothers or older men know anything about the law is when they get incarcerated. Because now they got to go to the law library while they're in the penitentiary, and they got to go and look up laws and pleadings and stuff in way to reduce their sentence, or if time served, they may not realize the time has been served. So, right? In this studio here, there's a lot of feedback going on. In other countries, they're not as fortunate like here. You know what I'm saying, Brother Amun? Because there's people who I've tried to help, like in Trinidad or Jamaica, and even in Africa, and they don't have access to the courts like we have here. All right, you have to get a barrister, is what they call them over there. All right, you definitely have to hire an attorney or lawyer in them foreign countries. Yeah, I think it's on your side, brother, because when you was moving around, I noticed the mic was making a lot of noise, Brother Amun. I don't know, because I can hear it loud on my side. Are you there, brother?
Yes. So I try to do something different now. So I got it hooked up to a Bluetooth. So maybe, do I sound too loud now? Is it good now?
No, you're good. But what happened is I'm getting a lot of feedback. So when you was moving around, I heard a lot of feedback. But I'm trying to continue to go with the show. But when you get too much of a feedback, I don't want the people to complain. There's a lot of feedback because they're going to hear the same thing I'm hearing.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, but how? What is the volume level? Is it 4, or can you bring it lower?
Let's see. It's 6 now. Is it too loud?
I thought it was going to be on 4.
What about 4?
Yeah, 4 would be better. But anyway, as I was saying, other countries is not as fortunate as we, the people here in the United States, because we have access to the courts. All right, we have access to the courts. But in the other countries like the Caribbean and South America, Central South America, I'm not sure how it is in Canada, but I know in Africa and in the Caribbean, they have to hire an attorney for whatever the situation may be. They don't even have housing court in some of those foreign countries. Here they do. They have an opportunity to deal with their issues here in housing. But in other countries, if you don't pay your rent, you can't get an extension of time. So they put a lock on the door. You can't get in until you pay them. So meanwhile, you're out of your house. Over here, we call that an illegal lockout. You know what I'm saying? So there's a lot of convenience here with the legal system. But the inconvenience is that people is not taking their time out to go learn what the process is. I mean, they got Office of Representative here. They got the Pro Se office here. So not only that, they have access to the court, but they would even give you a pro bono lawyer, or the court will assign you an attorney if you need one. So the people here really don't realize how fortunate they are here, but they're not taking advantage of that. It's so many people that's incarcerated and still incarcerated for so many years, you know? And so again, a very good case in point. I got a call today by one of the brothers that I know personally, and unfortunately he got a summons that we discussed earlier. And in the summons, all right, he was up here in court. The court date was today. But meanwhile, what was the interesting thing about it? The officer under CPL, which is the Criminal Procedure Law of the state of New York, Section 116.10, gives you the protocol of an arraignment, that an officer is supposed to arrest you, fingerprint you, and take your pictures to be arraigned before the judge. And because the officer failed to do that, right, because the brother man went directly to the court, they're telling him he got to go and get his fingerprint. Well, he shouldn't have to go voluntarily. I wouldn't agree to that. The officer didn't do his job. So now they want to put out a warrant for his arrest for something that the officer didn't do his job. All right. So the first thing that he could have done so we can deal with it is to postpone the case. So I should be hearing from him maybe around 4 o'clock to see the outcome of that situation. They're going to probably give him a postponement. All right. And we're going to deal with that matter. You know what I'm saying? Because we have to hold them liable and accountable when they don't do their job properly. All right. Soon, you know, and that's it. But the interesting thing about it, Brother Amun, is that he did talk to the marshals, and the marshal said if he has any problems to give him a call, you know, and deal with him. He said he has the right to remove his things from the property, even though he was evicted from the property. You know, so again, mostly in the United States is who I have to really address, because I would have to search the laws in other states. But even if you do know the laws, which is good to know, you can be able to deal with the attorney, because 9 to 10, the attorneys don't know, you know, everything they should know in reference to defending yourself. I mean, in the United States here, you can have an attorney, and the attorney is too busy siding along with the other side to a point where you can be subterfuge in your case. It's going to be the losing case because the attorney is not maybe familiar with that case. You know? So it's very important to be aware of what's going on. Very, very important.
Yeah.
You have anything to add to that?
Well, yeah, that go back to the last time I was on the show. Just tying into what you said about the client, you know, being familiar with what's going on with his or her case to give their attorney instructions according to the professional rule of responsibility, specifically Rule 1.2, which applies because one should know their case more than an attorney. Attorney is your mouthpiece.
True.
Right? And it's true that the attorney should be competent in his or her affairs and dealing with your case, but you should know more about your case than the attorney do.
True.
And so that's a decent connection, you know, tie in, you know, with what you said. And also too is getting out of the habit just to think that just because someone went to paralegal school, law school, that they know every law or even know the procedure. You know, that's a wrong, you know, way to go at that. You know, I think one question that clients need to ask their attorneys who representing them working on a case is experience.
True. And
not just so much of knowledge. How much experience do you have? You know, trial experience. These are questions that you need to ask, you know, attorneys, you know, who's going to represent you, is how much experience, trial experience do they have? You know, that's very major, because just because I say before, anybody can study to take a test, you know, and pass a test, but that doesn't make you an experienced trial attorney.
True.
You know, you just have the degree, you pass, you know, the test, but you lack in expertise in your penmanship, for the lack of a better word, and that's where those judicial canons, ethical canons, come into place.
Sure.
So I wanted to say that.
All right, we're going to come back from a commercial break, and there's something I'm going to chime in on what you said was very important. All right, so we're going to chime in for a commercial break.
Hello viewers, you are watching Millennium News 24. America and global villages seen to America independence built by immigrants, manufacturers, roads, highways, educations, healthcare, IT, scientists, space, business development to all thousands of multimedia and all major social media platforms and news network in America. Millennium News 24, one of truthfully news networks in America and global news organizations. Please watch, follow and subscribe. We are in iOS and Android devices, Roku, Amazon, Apple devices, all smart TV, globally Horizon satellite, social media Millennium News 24, Millennium TV 24. Website www.millenniumnews24.com and www.millenniumtv24.com. Thank you.
Yes, we're back. I want to chime in based on what you stated earlier before the commercial break. And you brought up a very good point. And we try to encourage people, to take up paralegal courses. And I've been doing that for many years ago because, again, when you get the Black's Law Dictionary, which is I highly recommend every household have it. It's not beautiful terms. And what I'm saying is that look up the word civilian, all right? And you would ask the average person out there today in the United States, in any of the states, are you a civilian? And most likely they're going to say yes. But when you show them the legal definition of the word civilian, it means one who's skilled and learned in law. You follow me? So you claim to be a civilian, right? When you don't know the law, you're not even skilled in the law. You don't have to technically go to law school or paralegal school, all right? They got so much information at the pro se office or the office of representative. They got the forms there, all right?
Right.
And so only thing you need to do is begin to start diving into those forms. You don't have to wait to get in trouble to go there. All right. People don't seem to be aware of what's going on in the system until they get in trouble. I don't care if it's a family court case where children are being taken away, all right, or a divorce case between husband and wife, all right, a case where it's traffic court, because, like, for instance, that's a good example. New York State Constitution, the Article 6 is the judiciary article. Every state constitution has a judiciary article, which is Article 6. And when you look in that Article 6 and you look up the different courts that's in that state, right, you will learn that there's no traffic court. All right. And I have given information to those out there who had traffic tickets and got those tickets thrown out. Why? Because there's no traffic court. So how do you say you're going to traffic court and then we don't even question, what court is this that we're in? You simply say, oh, they're going to say traffic court. But when you bring up the Constitution and the judge took an oath to that Constitution, there's no jurisdiction in venue for a traffic court. So what are they conducting? All right. So that ticket can be thrown out because the Constitution doesn't mention anything about a traffic court. That's a good example. Everybody in every state of the United States needs to pull out the state constitution and read it. Noble?
Yes.
So people is not being coherent of the laws of the state where they reside or the Commonwealth that they're in. All right. And I have been studying Commonwealth laws, like the Chancery Courts or Court of Common Pleas. All right, you got district courts, you got superior court, Supreme Court. All right, so you got various courts throughout the United States. All right, and again, people don't see the significance of this. The only time the significance of these laws that they would look at is when they get in trouble. You know, bankruptcy courts, because a lot of people was filing bankruptcy, especially during the time of COVID. All right, and most people don't even know that when you do file bankruptcy and you get the discharge under Chapter 7, the interesting thing about that, Brother Amon, is that those are losses. You know, you're supposed to be getting a 1041 for your losses, you know, because that's your estate. And your estate can be your bank account, the car that you own, stocks, bonds, houses that you may own, all right, working on your JOB or your businesses like an LLC or a partnership, all right. Those are your assets, all right. And unfortunately, when one files bankruptcy, you know, those assets have to be listed on a credit matrix. That way that the bankruptcy court would send it out to those creditors so that way they won't continue to harass you, you know? And so these are the things that I'm talking about. There's so many millions of people is into foreclosure, you know, and they don't know the laws. You know, I mean, as a matter of fact, they're not even reading the contract because the contract, deed of trust or mortgage specifically talks about MERS, which is Mortgage Electronic Registration System, Inc., is holding your title. But nobody, as a representative for MERS, is sitting at the table at the closing saying, we're going to hold your title. You don't even know who it is. So your title is being waived, unbeknownst to you, which is an unconscionable contract. And so now MERS is holding your legal title. You know, and if not MERS, the lender, depending on if it's a deed of trust, you know. So again, you know, if we don't know these laws pertaining to what our circumstances are, they're going to crush us. And we're going to wind up losing out, you know? Something that you want to chime in on, brother?
Yeah. Can you explain what an unconscionable contract is?
That's under the Uniform Commercial Code. An unconscionable contract means that, well, the best way to look at an unconscionable contract, again, for those, look up these legal terms. It's called an adhesion contract. An unconscionable contract is an adhesion contract. What is an adhesion contract? Once you know what an adhesion contract is, then you would know what an unconscionable contract is. So that's an excellent question. So again, the definition for adhesion means that the creditor, right, has the advantage to draft up the terms and conditions of the contract, right? And the one who's going to be endorsing the contract, which would be the borrower, is at a disadvantage because the borrower don't know financial language of the contract. All right. So now all contracts have to be insured, which people don't know about. All right. When they say that the lender, mortgage insurance means that the lender is protected from non-payment or default on loan. So when you look at your title insurance policy, it's the terms and conditions tells you exactly what one's supposed to do when you fall into default. You're supposed to contact your insurance company, and you're supposed to go into what? Arbitration, not foreclosure. And that's mentioned in the title policy, you know, which is the American Arbitration Association. All right, the American Arbitration Association. Every contract that's out there has that. I don't care if it's a car loan contract, as far as the policy is concerned, a mortgage or deed of trust contract. All those contracts has the AAA, which is the American Arbitration Association. And instead of them going to arbitration administratively, they want to go and take it to court. All right, this is what they want to do. So they are violating the administrative procedure law. All right, because the court for you to go to arbitration before you can bring it to court if you're not satisfied with the decision in the arbitration, which means that both parties would have to agree to arbitration as one. And if one party was not in favor of arbitration, they can always take it over to the court for review.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So people have to know these procedures. You know, they have to know the laws. You have to know the forms. You have to know the rules of the court. You know what I'm saying? And so again, Black's Law Dictionary is a very excellent dictionary to get because you need to look up the legal terms. So when you are reading a contract, you know what those terms are, what they mean. You know, like appurtenances. All right, and your deed. All right, the deed is a contract. All right, and there's language in your deed that nobody takes time. Nobody takes time to be able to read what the language is in the deed, because these contracts is a combination of law and finance. Their financial language in these contracts and their legal language in these contracts. So you got to know law and equity in order to really know what this contract terms and conditions are. And the best book to teach you about these contracts, right, is the Uniform Commercial Code. All right, which is pronounced as UCC, the Uniform Commercial Code. You know, so that's basically about it. You know? But we're still getting a lot of feedback on the phone. I mean, over the air. I don't know what's going on, but it just, you know. But any other questions, brother, or anything you want to add?
Yeah. So if it's in the contract and it's say you have to go to arbitration before you can go to court. Of course, like you said, both parties have to agree to arbitration. But
True.
If they just haul you into court, wouldn't that consist of breach of contract?
Well, I have to agree with you 100%, because if the contract talks about arbitration, all right, and that's also stipulated in the contract, the terms and conditions of what it's called, and they do talk about arbitration, you know, so it's interesting that you brought that out, but at the same time, that is a breach of contract, because if the creditor decides to bring you to court, that's a breach of contract, you know, and you can, people know that they can raise that issue in court. If the creditor brings you to court for a debt, you can raise the issue of arbitration. All right. I was just in court about a month ago, right? Just sitting there, just listening to what the judge is saying. And the judge is telling the people, you know, you can get your case heard today by an arbitrator, but if you want to get it heard by a judge, all right, for a judgment in your favor, we're going to have to reschedule you to come back. So if you want to do this today, as opposed to, you know, can you step away from the mic? Because I think what happened is, Brother Amun, I think every time you move closer to the mic, I notice that I'm getting a lot of feedback.
Yeah, I think, you know, I apologize for that too, because this happened to me the other night and I really didn't check into it. Maybe this computer have like a virus or something, because this has never happened before. Like it's on full, but as you were. Yeah,
no problem. Yeah, so again, so the judge would say, you know, you can go to an arbitrator and get your case heard that particular day that you're in court, all right? But the problem is the judge is misleading the people, because they say that if the arbitrator rules, his word is final, which is not true, because if a judge gives a judgment you don't agree with, you can appeal. So how can an arbitrator's decision be final when the judge's judgment can be appealed? All right, but in New York State, if an arbitrator, which you would say misapplied, you know, the facts and the law, you can do an Article 78 by petition, all right, of what that arbitrator have stated in their order. All right, you can go to Article 78. You know, Article 78 in New York is against a body or an officer. All right, and that's what you would use. But see, the judge would not say that. The judge would not tell you that. Again, how do I know these things? Because I read the CPLR, which is the Civil Practice Law and Rules. Every state has a civil procedure. Every state has a civil procedure. All right. And so when you look into civil procedure, all right, because it's a civil matter, it's going to show you exactly what the procedures are. So in the civil procedure, there's different articles. So in the state of New York, it's Article 78 that if you don't agree with the arbitrator's decision, you can do an Article 78 petition is what it's called. You see what I'm saying? So I'm just giving the information because people need to be aware of these things because so many people in the state of New York had a small claims court case and probably didn't agree with the arbitrator because the judge mislead them by saying the arbitrators weren't entitled. That's not true. Yeah. So anything you want to chime in on, brother?
No, not at the moment. I really can't like get out like really how I want to because like it's on 4 now, and if I turn it down too low, like I barely can hear you. You know what I mean?
Oh wow, see what you're saying. Yeah, it must be a virus in the system. But listen, there's somebody in Alabama that reached out to me. All right, and he has a tax issue. We can dialogue on that because nobody knows the tax laws. All right, and you got an employer that you work, doing business with, because everybody don't realize that they're a small business when you are working with an employer, because they never tell you that you was a small business. So when you go to publication 334, it's going to say small business, but when you peruse through there, you can see exactly your position. All right, because it talks about the terms and conditions in publication 334. All right. So my point is that this particular brother wrote a letter to the IRS and I said, brother, you have to be careful because they're going to take that as a protest. All right. And when you do what they call as a protest, they want to hit you with a penalty. All right. Of $5,000. They want to freeze your account, confiscate your account. They hit you with a 668. And the 668 is something that they do around the country. So this is something I can talk about because the 668 form is what the IRS agent uses. And the IRS agent is not supposed to send you a 668 form because he's not a revenue officer. A revenue officer and a revenue agent is not the same. So when you look up those two, you see that there's a difference between a revenue agent and a revenue officer. All right? And the employer is supposed to get permission from the IRS in order to collect money from your withholdings from your account with the employer. All right. But instead they give you a W-4 form, and at the end of the year they give you a W-2 form. All right. And there are some issues because the employer can cause you tax problems, just like any one of the tax preparing agencies. If they don't do your tax right, you get the problem. The IRS is going to hold you liable because you signed your signature to that tax form. All right? They're not going to hold H&R Block, Jackson Hewitt, Liberty Tax, or any other tax agent out there liable for misapplying your taxes. So a lot of people don't know about the tax, on how that operates, how that works. And again, the Internal Revenue Code is something that you got to know, like for instance, the 1040 form. All right. When it talks about the adjustable gross income. All right. But nobody's deducting the net from the adjustable gross income that's coming from off your W-2 form. People don't know these things. All right. Now they got digital assets, which is talking about cryptocurrency. Now you got to report that. At one time, the form didn't have it. So the tax form is always constantly changing because it's all political. It's all political. And again, nobody knows the tax codes. They don't know the Treasury regulations. All right. They don't know the tax laws. All right. And people don't have to be subjugated. All right. Anybody who's getting money's garnished from their check, their accounts frozen and confiscated, it's supposed to happen by a court order. And those agents is aware of that. The revenue officer is aware of that you're supposed to get a court order to be able to take from some people. All right. And they don't do that. They do what you call is an administrative hearing on paper. They'll send you some documents saying you missed in this tax year and that tax year and disability for missing that tax year. All right, but most people don't know that if you have an enormous amount of money that you have to pay back to the IRS, they got what they call as an offer in compromise. Most people don't know about what an offer in compromise is. You know, so again, what are we talking about? We're talking about tax laws, tax procedure. This is what we are talking about. You know, and so this is the situation that goes on. You know, and when we don't know the laws, because whatever category people today in the United States fall up under, there's laws that deals with those issues that people is having issues of. Like if you have an issue with the tax, it's tax law. You got criminal issues, there's criminal law. You got civil issues, there's civil law, family court law, social service law, domestic relations law, corporate law. They got so many laws in this country, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. But the only law that you can really look at is the one that's associated with your situation. You know, because one don't expect to study all those laws. But if your child been taken away, all right, you need to study social service law and family court and family law. All right, because you have to know what's going on. A lot of people don't know. You know, in each state, they regulate their laws differently. Because what I say in New York may not apply in Alabama, Mississippi, Tennessee, California, Florida, which means you have to look into those laws there and see how those apply. You see, because that's the only way people is going to be able to defend themselves. Because these lawyers out there are officers of the court, so they're going along with the court. Even though the court assigned a lawyer to you, that's what happens. All right, so we're going to take a commercial break, and we're going to be right back. All right.
Welcome to Millennium News 24, your trusted source for accurate, unbiased news. We're here to bring you the stories that matter most from America and around the world with integrity and a commitment to truth. In today's world, where misinformation can easily spread, having access to reliable news is more important than ever. At Millennium News 24, we aim to cut through the noise by delivering clear, fact-based reporting. Whether you're following major events or looking for in-depth analysis, we are here to serve you with transparency and respect for all communities regardless of color, wealth, or religion. This beautiful America was built by the resilience of its people, immigrants, entrepreneurs, doctors, and everyday individuals working together to create something great. It's this spirit that inspires us to provide you with news that's inclusive, honest, and relevant. We believe that informed citizens are the foundation of a strong society, and we strive to give you the knowledge you need to make a difference. From breaking news to insightful features, we bring you comprehensive coverage on politics, economics, health, culture, and much more. We believe that everyone deserves access to the truth, and we are proud to be a part of a global network that connects people through information. Stay informed by following us on your devices, including iOS, Android, Roku, Amazon, Apple TV, and Smart TVS. And for global access, we're also available on Horizon Satellite. Visit us at www.millenniumtv24.com or www.millenniumnews24.com to stay updated at Millennium News 24. Our mission is to promote unity, understanding, and progress in a rapidly changing world. Join us as we work to inspire positive action through the power of truth. Thank you for watching. Follow us, subscribe, and stay informed.
Yes, we are back. And of course, truly, we definitely want to stay informed, as what the commercial stated, because that's exactly what's the problem today with the people across the United States. All right. Again, the news is supposed to be a factor of keeping people to stay informed, which they don't do. Because again, as I said last Friday, the Social Security offices is shutting down all over the country. And it's not being mentioned on the news at all. All the Social Security offices are shutting down. All right. So now the question is, how is that going to affect people's benefits? You know, especially when you have to go into the Social Security office and get certain things that you need, certain documents that you need, you know, how would you get these things when you don't have access to the Social Security offices, you know? And of course, they're laying off a lot of employees in the Social Security office, all right? And so the process may even take even longer, you know what I'm saying? So again, you have the disabled, you have the retired, you know, and how's people and veterans, you know, how's people's going to survive? You know, it's like a hardship being put on the people when these offices are being shut down. You know, so unfortunately, it's under the administration that we're dealing with right now. And so again, you know, law and finance is a very essential part of living in the United States because, you know, there may be some other ways that you may financially have to survive other than a Social Security check. Because what else can you do? You know, how is this going to work out? Nobody's discussing these things. I mean, you got the governor, right? The mayors of these cities, and none of them is addressing these issues. You know, and the citizens within these city confinements are the one who's going to be affected. You know what I'm saying, Brother Amun? Are you there, brother?
Yes. What about, is it still shaky?
I'm listening, yes.
Okay. Yeah, because when I had that volume on real low, I don't know what's going on, but what I was fixing to say, everything that that I heard you say, then you mentioned something about the Social Security.
Yes.
Yeah. That is interesting topic,
Yes.
Because they changed the policy. I think it was last year. Because now when people just go into Social Security office, at one point, I know, you could just went in and had your appointment made, and they could see you. Now you have to make an appointment online. You just can't walk in there, like a couple years back. So that is something interesting to pay attention to. Because just little small stuff, just be connecting the dots. What's really going on.
True.
Changing, society and government. The small stuff like that. Can become major.
Yeah, it could become major. Exactly. Now listen to what you just said. You would have to go in and make an appointment, right? Go into the kiosk, and you can sit there and wait for them to call you. Right now, you got to do it online, right? But when they say do it online, what kind of appointment are you going to get? Are they going to send a Zoom link so you can see face to face on your case, or because you're not able to go to the office if they're shutting the offices down, So there's no alternative on how to deal with issues that you may need to deal with. Suppose you may need a benefit statement from them that may be very important, that you may need for who? Section 8 or social services. The benefit statement is going to show your income. So if it's going to show your income, well, how are they going to see your income to make some adjustments with Section 8 or social services? Everything is on your income, for those who are on Social Security. So there's no alternative. Nothing was being said about any alternative other than no notice that is shutting down. And that's another problem, because the public was supposed to receive notice that the Social Security offices is going to be shutting down, all right? And they should be speaking about an alternative to what you can do if you need to access the Social Security office, And again, you just leave people hanging up in the air like a dangling verb, and people just don't know what to do, So again, it's like you got to find other outlets to be able to compensate for what you may not get. The whole system right now is being interrupted, because, and I'm not even saying that the system is being interrupted by the Trump administration, because this was going on before Trump, and I'm not a Trump supporter, but the point is, people is pointing the finger at Trump. Only thing Trump is doing is exposing what the Democrats and Republican political platforms is doing to the taxpayers' money. You know what I'm saying? People's not seeing it like that. You know, because so much billions of dollars of taxpayers' money is going out to foreign aid. All right. But yet, look how we are suffering here. All right. They're talking about cutting out the school lunch. I never knew that USAID was funding the school lunches. All right. So now the states is going to have to go into their treasury to make sure that these children are being fed. Now on television, I watch TV. Why? Because I monitor what's going on out there. Right. And there's organizations out there that want people to donate money to keep school lunches going. You know, first time I've seen that. There's organizations out there now that's advertised on TV to donate monies for lunch programs. You know, and again, that's why I watch the television, because that was unheard of. I've never seen an organization that's sponsoring a food program for children when USAID was providing that. And again, who was the one who came up with feeding children for school? Was the Black Panther Party, who was being vilified by the feds at that particular time. But at the same time, they took their program and instituted it throughout the United States, that every child would have a free lunch to eat in between classroom periods. You know what I'm saying, Noble? You know, and so now that's going to be interrupted. You know, so nobody's talking about that. You know, this is what I'm saying. You know, so like the commercial said earlier, before we just got back on, you know, they keep the people informed. But that's what the news is supposed to do. Your local news, the governor, the mayor of the city, and none of them is saying anything. You know, and people need to go to their city hall council. That's another factor. All throughout the United States, people have to find out when is City Hall's council is going to have their meetings so they can bring these issues up at City Hall. A lot of people don't know about going to the City Hall council. You know, because that municipality is getting funded for you to be a citizen in that city. Right. You're getting funding. All right. Because the municipality cannot run the city without funding. Like the state cannot run the state without funding. The federal government can't run without funding. You know? So all this funding is based upon the taxpayers' money. You know, to keep the people going, keeping the government on, you know, from the top down to the local level. All right. So when these issues occur, when new regimes come in, a new administration come in, people all across this country should be at their city hall council and addressing these issues, because these are the same folks who want you to vote them in. So you vote these people in and then you get budget cuts, but they're taking taxes from you. But you know what I'm saying? There's budget cuts from feds all the way down to local level. There's budget cuts. So now when it comes to government grants, all right, that's been cut out. So now you got to go to the private sector for grants. So you have to have a creditable, notable grant writer, because some of the grant writers out there ain't no good, because they take your money and you would never see a grant. You know, that's another hustle for scam artists. You know what I'm saying? So you got to make sure that you get a credible track record of a grant writer, so that way you would know that if you pay money to get a grant, all right, because, you know, if aid is being cut off, a private sector can give you a grant, you know, because people's going to need it. People's going to need it, brother. Right. You know, so what's going on out there where you at in Alabama? You know, what's going on out there?
Pretty much the same old stuff, you know.
Like what? Give me an example when you say same old stuff, because I'm sure that that state is going to be affected too with all these cuts.
Well, yeah. I mean, you know, they had like a nationwide protest, maybe like 2 weeks ago, you know, about, you know, what's going on, like, you know, in government, you know, today. That's what I mean, you know, from state to state. You know, I can't think right now. I don't know, my mind is kind of cloudy. It was an organized protest like 2 weeks ago.
Gotcha.
That was, you know, from New York to California to here, you know, just going around just protesting actually what was going on, you know, in government, right? And you know what's interesting, you know, to me, because I'm not technically a Trump supporter. I like I tell my dad, I look at both sides.
True.
Right. The right and the left, you know, and I also look at, you know, my position, right, and where I stand at. And you know, as far as like, because anytime, you know, some type of, you know, law get changed, I looked at how I'm going to be affected by it, right? So what's interesting, what I mean, you know, the same thing is, you know, what's pretty much what's going on in California is going on in Florida as it relates to, you know, the shift, the climate of the government. And I'm not going to get off the subject, but COVID threw a monkey wrench in the game.
True.
You know what I mean? That threw a whole monkey wrench. And like you have now, we speak about the, you know, the children with lunches. You have right now, as today, a lot of children just behind, you know, on their classes due to the fact that when COVID came into place, everything went into a, you know, you have to do it off the laptop or the computer.
That's right. Still, yes.
I mean, it's a major issue going on. So, you know, like I agree with you, you know, 100%. You know, you can't necessarily say technically, you know, that this happened when Trump got in office. No, it's stuff been going on, right?
True, been going on.
Exactly. So, you know, he's just showing how corporate everything really is.
True,
right? So, you know, that's what I mean by that. It's pretty much, you know, same thing where you got people who voted, you know, which they never voted, right? You know, so it's about the people actually being aware of
exactly
who they are, right? From a perspective of, like you just say, being more proactive, you know, and not act out of emotion, because, you know, emotion. If I tend to say, okay, I want to vote for this party because of how I feel, you know, about what I saw on TV, right? If I'm acting off my emotion, I can't think clear. So I don't have a perspective on a positive or negative about whoever technically that's in office, in the sense of, you know, being too biased, because I can agree with certain things people say, and on the flip side, I may not agree with everything that people say. So that's my take on that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, you know, because at the end of the day, a court order is how you get things changed in this country. You see what I'm saying?
That's just one element.
Well, just one. What I'm saying, out of the context of saying, you know, what this person is doing, what this person is not doing. You know what I mean? So, I mean, just like the Rosa Parks situation, you know, that was changed by way through a court order, right? And so,
but that one just don't forget too, people went out to the streets to protest, and because that became a political climate, that it would have pressure on the politicians.
Right.
All right. Because that is the most powerful than any judgment or court order, is that when you got millions of people to come out to protest, now the politicians got to sit at the table and figure out, you know, how we going to, what you call, appease the people, you know, by changing the policy, you know. So, and this is why, like my mom used to tell me many years ago, she said, son, people got to stop voting for the party and stop voting for the policy. All right. Because if we start looking at the policy and see if the policy is going to benefit the people, then that's what we're voting on. All right. So that could be a Democrat, a Republican, a conservative, a liberal, whatever. We're going to vote on the policy, you know, but people don't vote on the policy. People want to vote with their party. and they figured the majority rule, but it shouldn't operate that way because at the end of the day, we all going to be affected. So then now what's happening? They're creating a division in the society. You got the Democrats on one side and the Republicans on the other side. It sounds like the Civil War to me again. If it's we the people, where is the Democrat, Republican, and we the people? It don't exist.
Right.
That doesn't exist. The we the people is not divided by political parties.
That's true.
They came up with this concept, because one side don't agree with the other side. So they had this 1880 Democratic Convention, 1880 Republican Convention, right? And then you have 1880, and they was making all their decisions on how they're going to politically run this country, with the taxpayers' money, So people need to be aware and stay informed, So what we're going to do is we're going to go on break. All right, we're going to go on a commercial break, and we'll be right back.